There's a phrase Americans use constantly that I never hear in Britain. Maybe you've heard it. You have a right to. Americans invoke rights the way British people invoke weather. When I moved here to the UK, I kind of expected to feel a little bit of a loss of them, to be honest, because obviously new country, new rules, right? What I actually felt though was confused. Many Americans will tell you that the United States has the best healthcare in the world. And in some very narrow, very expensive ways, that's arguably true. But here's the specific thing. In the United States of America, you don't actually have a right to know what something costs before you actually receive the treatment or the medication or the service. Like they don't sit down with you ahead of time and say, you have to have knee surgery and you have to have this, and this as part of that knee surgery and here are the costs associated with it. So therefore, you're told you have to have knee surgery. You go have knee surgery. Then you get four different bills from the four different pieces of the knee surgery that you have to pay for that your insurance company does not cover after you have your surgery while you're in recovery. See, you can ask as an American, you might get a number, but it's not necessarily binding. The bill that arrives 3 months later will most likely be different as there's negotiations that happen between the insurance company and the actual provider, whether it be the hospital or the actual individual doctor that performs that service. And the bill will also reference codes that you don't know, you're unable to look up, you have no idea what it actually references or what it pertains to. And it's all from a provider that you didn't necessarily choose because it's through a network that you didn't know that you were outside of. And I know it's extremely complicated. I probably lost anyone who's not American, but that is really the point of the United States insurance situation when it comes to private healthcare. There is no other developed country in the world where this is considered normal, as I can tell by a lot of your eyes that are probably glazing over. It's not that the NHS is free. It's just that everywhere else, the price is the price and you get to know ahead of time. A unique aspect of the United States is that it's one of the only developed nations with no federally mandated paid vacation time. Zero. Employers can offer it if they want to. Many do, but there is no floor. There is no mandate. There's just the average, what the industry is offering. And I bet if that changed, got reduced, most people's average vacation time would also get reduced. The freedom to work for a company that happens to be generous is not the same as a right to something. In Britain, and this totally surprised me, there's a legal minimum of 28 days, including bank holidays here in the UK. Now, for those of you who don't know, bank holidays are federal holidays that just have off. There's no specific holiday, there's no specific celebration or reason. They're holidays that workers in Britain have off, majority of them, in order to enjoy the springtime and the summertime. That's it. Taking your holiday is not considered a personality flaw here in the UK. Your manager doesn't look at you like you're asking to be excused from caring about the company for a couple hours or a day or so. Contrary to the American belief framing is that the mandatory vacation is government overreach. Like if the federal government mandated that workers actually get some time to recover and relax so that they could be more productive, as somehow that's like a form of tyranny. The British framing, however, is that it's a baseline to have a functional workforce within the country. And since I've lived both, I will tell you one of them is correct. In the US, GMO labeling was fought in court for decades. Partially introduced in 2022, but you don't get a label, you get a QR code on the packaging that you have to scan as the consumer to find out exactly what's in your food. In the UK, you don't have to scan anything. It's just on the packet. A simple and novel concept. I know. Americans were told that the GMO labeling debate was about freedom, specifically the freedom of companies to not be compelled to speak. Like freedom for them to not incriminate themselves, I guess, would be the equivalent explanation for layman. Your freedom to know what you're eating as a consumer, as the mass population of the United States was framed more as a threat to corporate speech rights rather than a protection of you as the consumer. I moved somewhere with better food labeling, and no one here calls it radical at all. It's called at will employment for those of you who may not be familiar with it. And most Americans don't understand how strange this is until they actually encounter the alternative. See, in the United States, in most of the states, you can be fired for any reason or no reason at all, or a made up reason that the company just thought of yesterday because they need to cut the workforce to make a profit. As long as it's not explicitly discriminatory under a very select few group of people, even in those cases, the burden of proof is usually put on the employee that has been terminated under their circumstances to prove it. So in the UK, after 2 years of continued employment with the company, you have unfair dismissal protection, which means that your employer has to show a fair reason and a fair process in order to justify your dismissal from that company. And if they cannot, then you, as the worker, have the right to go to a tribunal. A tribunal is a specialist court with jurisdiction over a certain area of civil law. It's basically like an administrative justice system where they hear the case of both sides and they determine whether or not the employer has rightfully and lawfully dismissed their employee. I actually know some people who were the third party of these types of situations in their jobs. And they all said that most of the time the company will just pay the person off a little bit and rather than go through the whole process of tribunal, because 90% of the time it actually ends up being in favor of the employee anyway. And it costs the company more to go through the entire process. When I explained at will employment to a lot of my British colleagues, they usually just looked at me like I was lying, like I was taking the piss or something. And most of them just questioned it. What do you mean? How can they just tell you to leave randomly? And this has happened to me personally. So I can vouch for the fact that it is not hyperbole and it's not a myth. They can dismiss you without warning. And in the United States, this is called freedom, specifically the freedom of contract or the freedom of market to self correct. What you're really free from is job security. Look, I'm not going to sit here and say that Britain is a utopia. I've lived here for 3.5 years, and I can tell you from firsthand experience, it's not. But there is a specific thing that happens when you leave the United States, and it is this. You realize that a lot of what was sold to you as a freedom was actually just exposure to medical bills, termination, whatever your employer decided to offer you as time off this year or anything in the way of benefits, to be honest. And I've just learned that real freedom, the kind that lets you take a holiday, that lets you know what's in your food, that makes you understand what you'll be paid and also what you'll be paying out for certain services, that isn't less freedom, in my opinion. It's more. It just doesn't get called the same thing here across the pond.